Hello friend, I want to tell you about the Volvo C30 car. The Volvo C30 is a compact, although its silhouette suggests something like a coupe. Not everyone remembers that this is not the first car of this type from the Swedish manufacturer. A completely similar model was the Volvo 480, sold in the 80s and 90s. Not only in terms of appearance, but also mechanics, there is something in common between these two models. It's about the suspension, which in both cases was not designed by the Swedes. In the 480, it was taken over by specialists from Lotus, because Volvo had no experience in producing suspension for a front-wheel drive car. In the C30, the running gear was taken from the Ford Focus 2. So both cars are characterized by excellent handling. Apart from its running gear, the Volvo C30 has more advantages. The design is certainly successful, presenting a mix of classic Volvo style with a more aggressive look than most compacts on the market. Even today, the car looks very good on the street, and in one of the more vivid colors it definitely attracts attention. Unfortunately, the sports body does not provide much spaciousness. This is a typical car for singles or a couple. The rear seat can only be accessed by tilting the backrests of the front seats. The glass boot lid is unusual, under which we will find a small trunk with a capacity of only 233 L. This is a B segment value. In addition, the loading threshold is exceptionally high. The cabin, like its S40 cousins, presents a premium level of craftsmanship in materials. The Volvo C30 competed with the Audi A3 and BMW 1 Series at one time. The dashboard is taken entirely from the S40, along with the characteristic central panel. The car was well equipped, and the secondary market is dominated by cars with solid equipment, often leather upholstery or automatic air conditioning. As befits Volvo, a full set of airbags and a safety system are standard. Volvo introduced systems such as IDIS, SIPs and active headrests to the C30. In 2010, the model underwent a facelift, during which the front part of the body was mainly changed. The interior remained the same. Production ended in 2012. Like the Volvo S40, the C30, based on the Ford Focus 2 platform, has fully independent suspension, with a multi-link system at the rear. The rear suspension was slightly redesigned for the C30, but the assumptions and operating principle are identical. The Swedes added their proverbial 5 cents and stiffened the body structure. Unlike the S40, the compact C30 was not offered with four-wheel drive. As for a rather unique and not very popular product, the Volvo C30 had a very rich range of engines to choose from. In total, there are 7 engines in different specifications. The smallest 1.6L petrol reaches 100 horsepower, and the most powerful T5 with a capacity of 2.5L gives as much as 230 horsepower. 3 diesels were also offered, of which the smallest, Mark D2, is a well-known PSA engine with a capacity of 1.6L and a power of 109 or 115 horsepower, and the largest, Mark D5, is already an independent Volvo design. It has a capacity of 2.4L and a power of 180 horsepower. An intermediate unit D3 and D4 with a capacity of 2.0L from PSA was also installed. All Volvo C30 engines above 2 liters had 5 cylinders until the facelift. What's broken? Since we are dealing with the top diesel version of the Volvo C30, I will start with the engine. This is the first self-designed compression ignition unit by Volvo, which was created in 2001 and was initially offered only in the S80 model. When it underwent the first, more serious technical changes in 2005, it found its way under the hood of other models, including the C30. In the described compact, it appeared only in the only power variant of 180 HP. The maximum torque is 400 Nm, which is achieved at 2,000 revolutions per minute. The D5 engine family up to 200 HP was supercharged with a variable geometry turbocharger, and in the more powerful versions with 2. The turbocharger in the Volvo C30 has electronically controlled turbine blade geometry and water cooling. From what I understand, The C30 did not receive a unit with piezo injectors, which appeared after the engine modernization, because it was withdrawn from this model, and the 5-cylinder engine was replaced with a 4-cylinder, 2-liter. This breakthrough came in 2010. The Volvo engine is a relatively young, but successful design. Its greatest advantage is its work culture and sound during acceleration. This is due to the 5 cylinders. Unfortunately, a larger number of cylinders entails higher costs. For example, relatively cheap, although not entirely durable, Bosch electromagnetic injectors can be regenerated. In the case of the D5 engine, this means an average cost of about $600. The good news is that service and parts are readily available and cheap. Costs also increase when changing glow plugs. The expensive part of the repair is the turbocharger, which is not recommended for regeneration due to its variable geometry. Failures of the motor controlling the geometry may occur. It is a durable element, but it does not like city driving, especially when not warmed up. The dry particulate filter does not like this either. Normally used, it lasts quite a long time, and replacing it is not too expensive. You can get a new one for $600 to $700. Considering the price of the car, this is a relatively small expense. It is not recommended to cut out the filter. During use, you must constantly monitor the oil level and make sure that it does not exceed the maximum. The biggest threat to the engine is a broken accessory belt. If it breaks, the ride will end on a tow truck due to lack of charging. Unfortunately, it happens that a damaged belt can mess up the timing drive, which results in engine damage. That is why specialists advise constantly monitoring the accessory drive, especially the tensioner. The manufacturer recommends replacing it every 90,000 kilometers, but it is better to do it a bit more often. In general, the D5 unit can be considered durable and trouble-free, because the above-mentioned faults are typical for diesels, and there are not that many of them. Another thing is that the experience with these engines is still small, because neither Volvo is one of the most popular brands, nor is the D5 engine the most common source of power. Apart from the engine, it is also worth mentioning the gearbox. If the car is equipped with a manual transmission, the only major operating cost will be replacing the clutch with a dual-mass flywheel. It is exposed to enormous forces, torque up to 400 Nm, so it is worth treating it gently and avoiding too low revs during acceleration, i.e. below 2000 revolutions per minute. Theoretically, the way to avoid expensive clutch replacement is to invest in an automatic, but not in this case. Unfortunately, the automatic transmission called Geartronic, which works with Volvo's 5-cylinder engines, is one of the most failure-prone designs on the market. The problems are various, and most often they are related to solenoid valves and control electronics. Unfortunately, the first one is very common in the C30 model, which is used by women who turn off the engine in the driving position or change the lever position to P during short stops, which forces a quick gear engagement when starting off again. Women also rely on the knowledge of mechanics, who rarely remember to change the oil in the transmission, and when asked to do so, they throw up their hands. In addition, there is again the issue of the large torque that the converter must transfer. Repairs to these transmissions are much more expensive than replacing the clutch in a manual. In the event of a failure and the desire to replace the Geartronic transmission, you should also be careful when buying a used gearbox. It would be best if it was a model from the Volvo C30, because although not only Volvo cars use these gearboxes, they are not always interchangeable. Apart from that, the Volvo C30 can be treated partly like the S40 and partly like the Focus. It shares with its bigger brother the problem with the center console, which suddenly stops working, and usually checking and possibly cleaning or improving the connections helps, but you have to dismantle the so-called waterfall. Problems with the electrics also concern the equipment and fittings, but this is not very common. The Volvo C30 does not corrode. What it has in common with the Focus is the chassis, and that's good news, because although it needs to be serviced more often than, for example, the competing Audi A3, spare parts are quite cheap and easily available. Operating costs can be considered relatively high due to the relatively high fuel consumption and high insurance premiums. Unfortunately, the engine, tempting with good performance, means that only with an economical driving style can you achieve low fuel consumption values. Normally, you have to count on 8 to 9 L, 100 km. In addition, insurance companies consider the C30 to be a car expensive to repair, and rightly so, and a good morsel for a thief. The consolation is that D5 engine repairs are relatively cheap, because although they are modern power units and have one cylinder too many, their simplicity is sometimes charming. On the one hand, pragmatism does not speak for this car at all. It is impractical and does not offer what classic compacts do. It also does not offer anything more than what can be obtained in cars of another brand or segment for a similar price. On the other hand, not every car is pragmatic. This car can certainly be liked. It distinguishes its owner on the street and, in addition, it is a lot of fun to drive. The successful chassis copes well with the powerful diesel engine, which, although it does not make the C30 a sports car, it is certainly a car with sports aspirations. There are no technical concerns about this model, but it is worth remembering to avoid automatics. It is better to buy a version with a smaller, 2-liter diesel if fuel consumption is more important than performance. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what breaks and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro.